Jack Miller stood by the observation window and watched the stars drift past. He had been aboard the research vessel Quiet Dawn for 6 months now. 6 months of learning their language, eating their food, and trying to understand their proud and ancient culture. As a from Earth, his job was to study alien species and find ways for humans and other races to work together. They had agreed to host him as part of an exchange program between their empire and the human colonies. They were unlike anything Jack had seen before. They stood over 7 feet tall with sleek silver fur that covered their muscular bodies. They had 4 arms instead of 2, each one ending in hands with retractable claws. Their faces were similar to the big cats of Earth, with forward-facing eyes, pointed ears, and long whiskers. They moved with a grace that reminded Jack of lions and tigers, but they walked upright like humans. They were warriors. That was the most important thing to understand about them. The Empire had conquered dozens of star systems through military strength. Their soldiers were feared across the galaxy. Even their scientists and merchants trained in combat from a young age. Honor, strength, and discipline were the pillars of their society. Jack respected them, but he also found them difficult to connect with. They saw humans as weak and soft. Humans were smaller, slower, and lacked claws or fangs. They tolerated Jack because the exchange program required it, but most of them ignored him or looked at him with barely hidden amusement. He did not mind. He was here to learn, not to make friends. But something had changed in the past few weeks. Jack had noticed a shift in the mood aboard the ship. The crew seemed worried. Conversations stopped when he walked into rooms. The usual confident energy of them had been replaced by something quieter and heavier. Jack discovered the reason by accident. He had been walking through the lower decks when he heard a sound he did not recognize. It was a soft, high-pitched whimpering. He followed it to a door marked with symbols he could not read. The door was slightly open, so he looked inside. It was a nursery. The room was large and padded with soft white material on the floors and walls. In the center, lying in a nest of blankets, were 5 small cubs. They were infants, their fur still fluffy and their eyes barely open. They were tiny compared to the adults, no bigger than human toddlers. Standing over them was a female that Jack recognized immediately. It was Ra, the High Mother and commander of the Quiet Dawn. She was one of the most powerful in the fleet, a decorated warrior who had led armies into battle. But right now, she did not look powerful. She looked afraid. Jack stepped back from the door, but it was too late. Ra had seen him. Her eyes met his, and for a moment, neither of them moved. Then she turned away and continued watching her cubs. Jack knew he should leave, but curiosity held him in place. He had studied many alien species, and he had never seen cubs before. They were rare and precious, did not reproduce often, and each litter was celebrated as a blessing. But something was wrong with these cubs. Jack could see it even from the doorway. They were too still, too quiet. Healthy young animals should move and squirm and make noise. These cubs lay in their blankets like they had no energy at all. Over the next few days, Jack asked careful questions to the crew members who would speak to him. He learned the truth piece by piece. Ra had given birth to her litter 3 months ago while the ship was deep in unexplored space. The cubs had seemed healthy at first, but they had not grown the way they should. They were smaller than normal. They were weaker than normal. They slept too much and moved too little. The ship's doctors had examined them many times. They found no disease, no infection, no genetic problems. The cubs ate well and showed no signs of pain, but they were not developing properly. Their muscles were soft. Their coordination was poor. They could barely walk without falling over. The doctors had no explanation and no cure. They could only watch as the cubs grew weaker day by day. Jack understood now why the crew was so worried. In culture, a mother's cubs reflected her strength and honor. Weak cubs meant shame for the entire family. But more than that, these cubs were in real danger. If they did not grow stronger soon, they might not survive at all. He wanted to help, but he did not know how. He was not a doctor. He knew nothing about medicine or biology. What could a small, soft human do that they could not? The answer came to him late one night as he lay in his quarters trying to sleep. He was thinking about the cubs, about how still they were, about how the nursery was so quiet and empty. And suddenly, he remembered something from his childhood on Earth. His grandmother had lived on a small farm in Ohio. She had kept many animals, including cats. Jack remembered one summer when her old tabby cat had given birth to a litter of kittens. He had watched those kittens grow from blind, helpless little things into fast, playful hunters in just a few months. And he remembered how they did it. They played constantly. They wrestled with each other. They chased anything that moved. They pounced and climbed and tumbled around the farm all day long. Their mother encouraged them, twitching her tail for them to attack, batting them gently with her paws, teaching them to hunt through games. Jack sat up in bed as the idea formed in his mind. The cubs were not sick. They were bored. They were lying in a padded room with nothing to do and no reason to move. Their bodies were not developing because they were not being used. On Earth, cats knew instinctively that cubs needed play to grow strong, but they did not play. They trained. They drilled. They practiced combat with serious discipline. The idea of play was probably foreign to them, maybe even insulting. But maybe, just maybe, Jack could show them another way. He did not sleep for the rest of the night. He was too busy planning what he would say to the High Mother. Jack waited 3 days before he approached Ra. He needed time to organize his thoughts and choose his words carefully. There were proud people, and the High Mother was prouder than most. If he said the wrong thing, she would dismiss him without listening. Or worse, she might take offense and end his time aboard the ship entirely. He requested a formal meeting through the proper channels. To his surprise, Ra agreed to see him that same evening. The meeting took place in her private quarters, a large room decorated with weapons and battle trophies from her many campaigns. Her mate, Warfather O, was also present. He was even larger than most males, with scars crossing his muzzle and arms. He looked at Jack with cold, yellow eyes and said nothing. Ra sat in a chair that looked like a throne. Even seated, she was taller than Jack standing. She gestured for him to speak. Jack took a deep breath and began. He told her that he had seen her cubs in the nursery. He apologized for intruding on a private moment, but he explained that he had been thinking about them ever since. He said that he believed he might know what was wrong with them. O growled low in his throat. Who was this human to speak about cubs? What could he possibly know that their own doctors did not? Ra raised one of her hands and O fell silent. She looked at Jack with an expression he could not read. Then she told him to continue. Jack chose his next words very carefully. He told them about Earth and the many species that lived there. He said that humans had shared their planet with countless other animals for thousands of years. They had learned much by watching these creatures. He told them about the domestic cat. Ra's ears twitched with interest. She knew about cats, she said. The humans had brought some aboard their ships as companions, small, furry creatures with no apparent purpose. Jack smiled a little at that. Yes, he said, cats were small. They weighed only a few kilograms and could fit in a human's lap. They had no technology, no language, no civilization. But they were predators, some of the most efficient hunters on Earth. He described how cats moved with perfect balance and lightning reflexes, how they could leap many times their own body length, how they could twist in midair and always land on their feet, how they could track the smallest movement and strike with perfect accuracy. They were listening now, even O. They understood predators, they respected hunters. Jack told them that Earth cats were born helpless, much like cubs. Newborn kittens were blind and deaf. They could not walk or feed themselves. They were completely dependent on their mother for survival. But within a few months, those helpless kittens became skilled hunters ready to survive on their own. How did they do it? How did they grow so strong so fast? The answer, Jack said, was play. O snorted with disgust. Play. Was the human joking? Play was for children who had nothing better to do. Cubs did not play. They rested until they were old enough to train properly. Jack had expected this reaction. He stayed calm and continued speaking. He explained that for Earth cats, play was not a waste of time. Play was training. When kittens wrestled with each other, they learned how to fight. When they chased moving objects, they learned how to hunt. When they climbed and jumped, they built the muscles they would need as adults. The mother cat understood this instinctively. She did not let her kittens rest all day. She woke them up. She played with them. She twitched her tail to make them pounce. She rolled balls for them to chase. She wrestled with them gently, teaching them how to use their claws without hurting anyone. The kittens thought they were having fun, but really they were developing their bodies and their minds. Every game made them stronger, faster, and smarter. Jack paused and looked at Ra directly. He said that he believed her cubs were healthy. There was nothing wrong with them that medicine could fix, but they were lying in a quiet room with nothing to do. Their bodies had no reason to grow because they were not being used. Ra was silent for a long moment. Her golden eyes studied Jack's face, searching for any sign of deception or mockery. She found none. She asked him what he was suggesting. Jack said that he wanted to show her the exercises that Earth cats used to make their young stronger. Not formal training, not military drills, just simple activities that would encourage the cubs to move and explore and develop naturally. O stood up from his chair. This was absurd, he said. Was the human really comparing the children of warriors to Earth pets? Did he expect the future soldiers of the Empire to chase strings and bat at toys like common animals? Jack did not back down. He said that Earth cats had survived for millions of years. They had thrived in every environment from frozen mountains to burning deserts. They were not weak or foolish creatures. Their methods worked. O began to argue, but Ra silenced him with a single word. She stood and walked toward Jack until she towered over him. Her presence was overwhelming, but he held his ground. She asked him why he cared. Her cubs were nothing to him. If they died or lived, it would not affect his mission or his life. Why would a human risk insulting the High Mother of a warship? Jack thought about the question. He could have said something diplomatic about cooperation or scientific curiosity, but instead, he told her the truth. He said that he had watched her face when she looked at her cubs. He had seen the same fear and love that his own mother had shown when he was sick as a child. Those feelings were universal. They crossed all boundaries of species and culture. Her cubs were not just future soldiers. They were her children, and she loved them. He wanted to help because it was the right thing to do. Ra stared at him for what felt like an eternity. Then she stepped back and made a decision. She told Jack that he had one chance. If his methods harmed her cubs in any way, she would kill him herself. But if there was any possibility that he was right, she had to try. She asked him to show her what Earth cats knew about raising the young. Jack spent the next 2 days preparing. He walked through the ship looking for materials he could use. He found ropes in the storage rooms, soft cloths in the medical bay, and small balls in the recreation area. He asked the ship's engineers to build platforms of different heights using spare metal and padding. He collected empty containers and arranged them into tunnels and hiding spots. When he was finished, he had transformed an empty cargo bay into something that had never existed on a ship before. He called it a developmental play area. They had no word for it in their language. Ra had announced that the human would be demonstrating new techniques for cub development. She did not explain further. By the time Jack was ready, word had spread through the entire ship. Nearly every crew member who was not on duty came to watch. They gathered around the edges of the cargo bay, dozens of silver-furred warriors looking down at the small human and his collection of ropes and toys. Some of them seemed curious. Most of them seemed amused. A few were openly hostile, whispering to each other about the foolish human who thought he could teach how to raise their young. O stood with his arms crossed, his expression dark. He had argued against this demonstration until the very last moment. Only Ra's direct order had convinced him to allow it. Jack tried to ignore the watching eyes. He focused on what he needed to do. He began by explaining what they were about to see. He said that on Earth, young animals learned through movement and exploration. Their bodies grew stronger by being used. Their minds grew sharper by solving problems. Rest was important, but too much rest made muscles weak and reflexes slow. He picked up a length of rope and held it where everyone could see. This, he said, was one of the simplest tools that Earth cats used. The mother cat would drag it along the ground or twitch it back and forth. The movement attracted the kitten's attention and triggered its hunting instincts. He demonstrated by pulling the rope slowly across the floor, then making it dart to one side. He explained that the kitten would watch the movement, learning to track targets with its eyes. Then it would crouch, preparing its body to spring. Finally, it would pounce, using every muscle in its legs to launch forward. A few of them laughed. This was hunting training for cubs, chasing a string. Jack continued without reacting to their mockery. He explained that the exercise was not about the rope itself. It was about what happened inside the cub's body. Tracking the movement developed eye coordination. Crouching built leg strength. Pouncing required timing and balance. Each attempt, whether successful or not, strengthened the connections between brain and muscle. He showed them other techniques. He demonstrated how kittens wrestled with each other, learning to control their strength and judge distance. He showed how they climbed vertical surfaces, building grip and upper body power. He rolled balls across the floor and explained how chasing them developed speed and endurance. They watched in silence now. Some of them still looked skeptical, but others had begun to listen more carefully. They recognized some of what Jack was describing. The movements he demonstrated were the same basic skills that soldiers used in combat, just for young bodies. Ross stepped forward and asked Jack to stop talking. She said that explanations were not enough. She wanted to see if his methods actually worked. She ordered one of her attendants to bring the cubs. Jack felt his heart beat faster. This was the moment that mattered. If the cubs did not respond, everything he had said would be dismissed as human foolishness. The attendant returned carrying a small bundle of silver fur. It was the weakest of the 5 cubs, a female named. She hung limply in the attendant's arms, her eyes half closed. She looked exhausted even though she had done nothing but sleep all day. The attendant placed on the padded floor of the cargo bay. She lay where she was put, barely moving. Jack knelt down beside her. He spoke softly, telling her that everything was okay. Then he picked up the rope and began to drag it slowly past her face. At first nothing happened. Watched the rope with dull eyes, but she did not move. Jack heard muttering from the crowd. O made a sound of disgust. Jack kept going. He moved the rope in a different pattern, making it wiggle like a snake. He let it brush against his paw. Something flickered in the cub's eyes. Her ear twitched toward the movement. Jack pulled the rope away slowly, letting it slide across the floor just out of reach. His head turned to follow it. Her paw moved just a little, as if she wanted to reach out. He brought the rope back and let it touch her paw again. This time, she batted at it. The movement was weak and clumsy, but it was a movement. It was the first voluntary action Jack had seen from any of the cubs. He praised her gently, keeping his voice warm and encouraging. Then he continued the game, moving the rope in patterns that required her to reach farther, turn her head more, shift her body to follow. Minutes passed. His movements grew stronger. Her eyes grew brighter. She was still weak, still clumsy, but something had awakened inside her. The instincts that had been sleeping were starting to wake up. Jack rolled a soft ball past her. She watched it go, her head tracking the movement smoothly. Then, to everyone's astonishment, she pushed herself up onto her legs and took 2 wobbly steps toward it. She fell over before she reached it, but those 2 steps were more than she had taken in weeks. The cargo bay had gone completely silent. They stared at the cub on the floor, unable to believe what they had just seen. Picked herself up and tried again. This time she made it 3 steps before falling. She let out a small sound, a tiny growl of frustration and determination. Jack looked up at Ra. The High Mother's eyes were wide. He saw tears forming in them, though she would never admit it. She asked him if he could teach this to her and her crew. She asked if he could save her cubs. Jack said yes. The days that followed changed everything aboard the Quiet Dawn. Jack worked with the cubs every morning and every evening. He started with short sessions because the cubs tired quickly, but each day they lasted a little longer. Each day they grew a little stronger. Remained his favorite, though he tried not to show it. She had been the weakest, the one closest to giving up, but something had sparked inside her during that first demonstration. Now she was the most eager to play, the first to chase the rope, the loudest to complain when the sessions ended. Her 4 siblings quickly caught up. There was a male named who loved wrestling more than anything else. He would tackle his sisters and brothers at every opportunity, rolling around on the padded floor with happy growls. There was a female called who preferred climbing. She would scale the platforms Jack had built, higher and higher each day, then cry for help when she was too tired to get down. The other 2 cubs, a male and female from the same birth, were quieter but equally determined. They worked together like a team, practicing their pounces on each other and sharing the toys Jack provided. Jack taught Ra and her attendants how to continue the exercises without him. He showed them how to wiggle the rope at different speeds to match each cub's ability. He explained when to make the games harder and when to let the cubs rest. He taught them the importance of praise and encouragement, of making the cubs feel successful even when they failed. They struggled with this at first. Praise did not come naturally to them. In their culture, success was expected and failure was punished. The idea of celebrating a cub for trying, even when they did not succeed, seemed strange and soft. But they saw the results. They watched as their cubs grew stronger and more confident each day. They heard the happy sounds the little ones made when they caught the rope or reached the top of a platform. Slowly, they began to understand. Ra was the first to truly embrace the new methods. She began spending hours in the play area with her cubs, inventing new games and challenges for them. Jack found her one morning dangling a cloth strip from one of her 4 hands while the cubs competed to catch it. She was laughing, a sound he had never heard from her before. O took longer to accept what was happening. He watched from a distance for the first 2 weeks, his expression unreadable. He never participated in the exercises. He never played with his cubs directly. But Jack noticed changes in him too. The war father started visiting the play area more often, always claiming he was just passing through. He asked questions about the exercises, pretending to be skeptical but listening carefully to the answers. He stood closer to the cubs each time, watching them with something softer in his yellow eyes. One evening, Jack finished a session late and decided to take a walk before sleeping. He passed by the cargo bay and heard sounds coming from inside. Curious, he looked through the doorway. O was alone in the play area with his cubs. He had a rope in one of his massive hands and was dragging it across the floor while the 5 little ones chased after it. When caught it, he let out a low rumble that might have been a laugh. When pounced on his foot instead of the rope, he did not scold the cub. He just gently pushed him away and continued the game. Jack backed away from the doorway without making a sound. He did not want to embarrass the war father. Some things were private. The changes spread beyond Ra's family. Others aboard the ship became interested in what was happening in the cargo bay. They came to watch the sessions, and some of them began asking questions. A few of them had cubs of their own back on and they wanted to know if these methods could help their children too. Jack found himself teaching classes to groups of warriors, explaining the principles of developmental play. He showed them videos he had stored in his personal device, recordings of Earth cats playing with their kittens. The warriors watched in fascination as tiny predators on a distant planet demonstrated the same techniques Jack had been teaching. Some of them still resisted. They called it soft human nonsense, a corruption of proper traditions. But their voices grew quieter as the weeks passed, and the evidence became impossible to ignore. Ra's cubs were thriving. At 3 months old, they had been barely able to stand. Now, at 6 months, they were running and jumping and climbing with energy that exhausted everyone around them. Their muscles had developed properly. Their coordination had improved dramatically. The ship's doctors examined them again and reported that they were not just healthy but exceptional. Little, once the weakest of the litter, had become the strongest. She could climb faster than her siblings, pounce farther, and wrestle longer without tiring. The other cubs followed her lead, treating her as their natural leader. Jack watched her one afternoon as she stalked a ball across the cargo bay. Her movements were smooth and precise, her eyes locked on the target. She crouched low, her hindquarters wiggling exactly the way Jack had demonstrated months ago. Then she sprang forward and caught the ball in mid-roll, letting out a triumphant growl. She looked up at Jack with bright golden eyes, her tail waving happily. He knelt down and rubbed the top of her head, feeling the soft fur between her ears. Ra appeared beside him. She watched her daughter playing and said nothing for a long moment. Then she spoke quietly. She told Jack that she had been wrong about humans. She had thought they were weak because they were small and soft. But she understood now that strength came in many forms. The human had looked at her dying cubs and seen what a shipful of warriors could not. He had saved her children with wisdom borrowed from tiny creatures on a distant world. She said she would never forget what he had done. Jack looked at, who had already found another ball to chase. He smiled and said he was just passing along what Earth cats had taught him. The quiet dawn entered orbit around them on a bright morning 3 months after Jack had first demonstrated his methods to the crew. Through the observation windows, Jack could see the planet below, a world of vast forests and towering mountains covered in silver and green. It was beautiful in a wild, untamed way that reminded him of pictures he had seen of Earth before humans had built their cities. Ra had sent reports ahead describing what had happened aboard her ship. She had written about her cubs, about their miraculous recovery, and about the human who had made it possible. The reports had caused quite a stir among the leaders of the Empire. A human teaching how to raise their young. The idea was absurd. Many refused to believe it. But Ra was a High Mother, respected throughout the Empire for her victories in battle and her wisdom in leadership. Her words carried weight. The Council of Mothers, the governing body responsible for all matters relating to families and children, had demanded to see the evidence for themselves. Jack stood in the shuttle bay as the ship prepared to descend. He was nervous in a way he had not been since his first day aboard the Quiet Dawn. Meeting alien warriors in space was one thing. Presenting his ideas to the ruling council of an interstellar empire was something else entirely. Ra found him there, staring at the shuttle that would carry them to the surface. She stood beside him in silence for a moment, then spoke. She told him that he had nothing to fear. She would be with him, and so would her cubs. The council would see the truth with their own eyes. All he had to do was explain what he had explained to her. Jack asked what would happen if the council rejected his methods. What if they decided that human ideas had no place in culture? Ra considered the question. Then she said that even if the council rejected everything, it would not matter. Her cubs were alive and strong because of him. She would teach other mothers herself, council or no council. The truth could not be hidden once it was known. The shuttle descended through clouds and landed in a courtyard surrounded by massive stone buildings. Of all ages lined the streets to watch. Word had spread about the human and his strange ideas. Some looked at Jack with hostility. Others looked curious. A few, especially the mothers holding young cubs in their arms, looked hopeful. The council of mothers met in a great hall with walls covered in the history of their people. Paintings showed famous battles, legendary warriors, and mothers who had raised generations of soldiers. The council members sat on elevated platforms, looking down at the floor where visitors stood to address them. There were 12 of them, all female, all decorated with the marks of their accomplishments. They were the oldest and most respected mothers in the empire. Some had raised dozens of cubs over centuries of life. Their word was law when it came to how children should be brought into the world and prepared for adulthood. Ra presented her cubs first. The 5 young ones walked into the hall with their heads held high, their movements confident and graceful. They were still small compared to adults, but there was nothing weak about them now. They moved like predators, alert and ready, their eyes scanning the room with intelligence. The council members leaned forward to examine them. One of them called to her platform and asked the cub to demonstrate her abilities. Climbed the platform easily, showed her claws and her balance, and answered questions in the simple language of young. The council member touched her muscles and felt her joints and could find nothing to criticize. Then it was Jack's turn. He stood alone on the floor of the great hall, surrounded by the most powerful females of an alien empire. He was smaller than any of them, weaker than any of them, a soft creature from a distant world. But he was not afraid anymore. He told them about Earth and its cats. He showed them videos of kittens playing, of mother cats teaching their young through games and gentle wrestling. He explained the science of how young bodies developed and why movement and play were essential. He spoke clearly and simply, the way he had learned to speak aboard the Quiet Dawn. The council listened without interruption. When he finished, they conferred among themselves in low voices. Jack waited, his hands clasped behind his back. Finally, the eldest council member spoke. She said that she had lived for 400 years and raised 37 cubs. She had seen many changes in society over the centuries. Some changes were good, some were bad. She had learned to judge ideas by their results, not by where they came from. The results before her were undeniable. Ra's cubs, born in the emptiness of space far from there, were stronger and healthier than many cubs born under the care of the finest physicians. The humans' methods had worked. She announced that the Council of Mothers would adopt what she called the Earth Cat Development Protocols into standard practice. All mothers would be taught these techniques. All cubs would benefit from them. The hall erupted in murmurs. Some voices were approving, others uncertain. But the council had spoken. The decision was made. Before Jack could leave the hall, Ra called him back. She walked to the center of the floor and knelt before him, which shocked the assembled into silence. A High Mother did not kneel before anyone, certainly not before a human. She announced that she wished to honor Jack for saving her cubs and for giving a gift to all future generations of children. She presented him with a small pot of silver dye and asked permission to mark him. Jack did not understand fully what was happening, but he nodded. Ra painted symbols on his forearm, ancient marks in the tradition. When she finished, she stood and announced that Jack was now Friend of Cubs, a title that had never been given to anyone outside the species. The council members bowed their heads in acknowledgement. In the crowd beyond the hall, Jack could hear cheering. Later that evening, Jack sat on a balcony overlooking the capital. Ships flew through the sky, and distant forests stretched to the horizon. He looked at the silver marks on his arm and thought about how strange life could be. He had come to space to study aliens. He had ended up teaching ancient warriors how to play with their children. And now, his name would be remembered in an empire spanning dozens of star systems. All because of lessons learned from an old tabby cat named Mittens, who had never left the small farm in Ohio where she spent her entire life. Jack smiled and wondered what his grandmother would think if she could see him now. He hoped she would be proud. Somewhere in the city below, 5 young cubs were playing, chasing toys and wrestling with each other under the watchful eyes of their parents. They did not know that they had changed history. They only knew that playing was fun and that the strange little human had been kind to them. That was enough.